to the Heritage Center for allowing me to have this time to do this. So this is called Delivering Convey History, the Cultural Network, and in Demand High. That means, does anyone know what that means in Alpha? Huh? What? Maybe, yeah. So this is the part of the presentation where I talk about myself a little bit. It's not really part of our Himdag to do that. It's kind of stepping out, because we like to describe ourselves as really humble. But I, on the other hand, kind of opposite. So I'm Darius Enos. I work for the Cultural Resource, for the Tribal Historic Preservation Office, and my boss is Barnaby Lewis, and I work with Larry Manelli Jr., who's our archaeological specialist, and Raylan Thomas, who's the other Cultural Resource specialist. And along with this presentation, I kind of will be talking a little bit about what our office does. And my parents are Darius Enos and nurse. And we're from District 6, Komatke Village. Oh, and I have a degree in American Indian Studies from ASU. And this is our community that we know and love, Gila River Indian community, kind of right up there in District 6, that corner of District 6. That's where we live in Hill Crossing. So when we talk about the community and the history, I just wanted to use this time to emphasize that it's actually bigger than the reservation boundaries. And we identify with the Himdag who lived within this area and beyond this area as well. So when we talk about our history, I like to talk about the prehistory and include it into as part of our identity. And before I get started on that, I want to introduce this concept of our Himdag as a network, which is basically, if you know what a network is, it's kind of like a way of communicating with each other. So like your work computers, they're all connected to a network. Your cell phones are connected to a network to communicate. And I argue that our network is basically our tribe, and all the things that make up our tribes are every little thing from the animals to the plants, to the water, the rivers, to anything, even the archaeological items that we find as prehistorical. Some of the stone matatis, the baskets we find, the pottery, the effigies that we find, those are all part of our network. And they make up who we are, they communicate to us who we are. So I hope when you see those things in places like museums like this, that you identify with those things and that you make it part of your identity, your network. You should feel like you're tapping into something. And that kind of accompanied with our oral history. We didn't write anything down, so the oral history is really oral history, oral practice. The story of telling things is really important to our culture. Memorizing things, and I think having a sound mind and body is really important, because when we look at the items, the prehistorical items, sometimes you'll find things like hohopa, which is has cosmetic uses and medicinal uses. Women would put it in their hair, and it's used to like an anti-wrinkle cream. So I really think that when we say that we're humble and we live kind of a life that is with humility, I kind of think that it's just because that's kind of all we have left, all we've ever had left in this modern times, is what we know, the small community preservation. And there's a lot of things beyond that. So I'll try to convey that in this presentation. So just going along with the network, a lot of these are artifacts found in the ground. Some of them aren't intact when they are discovered or they are uncovered. If they are intact, you can see the artistry displayed in these items. Like I said, these are part of the network that you guys tap into, or seeing your people's creativity, and it's great examples of the craftsmanship required to make these items, and they reflect the times in which they lived. Like we're familiar with the desert here in the community, but a lot of these have depictions of fish and birds, and there's all kinds of different animals that we may not be familiar with nowadays. And some that would be like the horny toad. And these items are found not within just the River Indian Community Reservation, but all around the yellow area of this map, which is known primarily as the Himdag territory. They had extensive trade networks and built cities, extensive cities. In Jack Weatherford's book, Indian Givers, the author argues that the Himdag moved the same amount of earth that the Egyptians did to build the pyramids. And they moved the earth to build canal systems, to provide farming, to fish, to build their livelihood. And they build structures that are regarded as grand and kind of architectural marvels. So one you guys might be familiar with is Casa Grande ruins, and an outfit that's called Seven Rocky. Have any of you guys been there before? Casa Grande ruins. So what's sticking out is, I believe, a third story of a structure that the Himdag built. And this is one of the most, ruins that we have left. And there are many like this throughout like the Phoenix area, or as far away as far north as Payson, south of Flagstaff, and they're considered Himdag. The archaeologists, sometimes they use the term Salado or membrane sometimes to identify these. This is an artist's rendition of what the Casa Grande ruins look like. So if they dig more underneath, they find more layers, more floors. This is Beshbagoa in Little Miami, Arizona. So this is primarily considered Apache territory, but these structures were built before the Apaches occupied those areas. And this is an example of one that's remaining. And just to give you an idea of what these places are managed, it depends on if it's what land it's on, if it's considered private, if it's considered municipal or state. There are a lot of these structures like this on private land that it's up to the owner on what they want to do, if anything. A lot of these places have been archaeologically, raided or looted for artifacts. So those are items that are connected to our people, but they're currently in museums or some Metagon's attic or basement, and they keep these as treasures, as it's like kind of hunting to them, so they kind of display those things or keep it to themselves. Once in a while, they will get a conscience, I guess, and donate them back to the tribe. But if, like for my position, if it's in a museum or a federally funded, mainly museum, then we have a chance to return it to the tribe, which is called repatriation. This is another structure, the Grande Cultural Park.
Is that here?
This is in the city of Mesa, yeah. And they, like I said, if the owners, whoever owns where these places are, want to conserve it, like Pueblo Grande or Sidovaki, the city of Phoenix decided to save Pueblo Grande, and that's why it's there. And the city of Mesa decided to conserve Mesa Grande, that's why it's there. Otherwise, it's all private land. There's different areas, different structures like this all throughout the city, but they get destroyed because of development, unfortunately. And the Tribal Historic Preservation Office, if it's a federally funded project, we do get to have a say in if there's human remains there, or if there are sacred objects or objects of cultural patrimony. We do get to have a say in having those returned to the tribe. If it's on state land, there are laws pertaining to human remains and sacred objects as well. But for the most part, the majority of the land in the Phoenix area and beyond is private land. So this is the concept I wanted to talk about, I guess, and all the resources that we have a hand in. It kind of makes up our Himdag, and a lot of people want pieces of our Himdag. Whether they know it or not, this is how it affects us. Through land. In the 1800s, when it was just maybe the Atam and the Jukum, or after the Jukum, the federal government took the land from the Mexican country. They started coming, the white people started coming to the community. The federal government had a land grant, and they said any person that is able to turn land into like a ranch, they can have free water. And where does that water come from? The water comes from the rivers that they started diverting. And that set up Metagon people to develop themselves and be a part of like the capitalist society. And that was a federal legislation that they said that it kind of put people ahead of us. Because at the time, when Gila River, when we did have control of our water, it did support agricultural crops a lot in surplus, where we did have an economic advantage in the 1800s. The crops went to be bought by the North during the Civil War, and it went to feed those people fighting in the Civil War during the winter. And otherwise they didn't have anything to eat. So our crops helped to fight in the Civil War. Our language is used primarily like in the archaeological context of the word Hohokam, which is Magadan people have turned it into Hohokam. They use it, but they don't use it in the same way or the same respect that our tribe does. The Hohokam are kind of like my boss, Barnaby Lewis. He uses the example if he were to be in an accident and die like this day, then he would be considered a Hohokam, somebody who had gone before us. And the Magadan archaeologists use Hohokam to describe and separate us from our ancestors, basically. As well, the language is kind of not supported by the government. They instill boarding schools and also along with churches, instill boarding schools where we don't really know a lot of our language to this day. And artifacts, again, these places that where our ancestors built, a lot of those tools and those pottery and baskets and things for everyday life get stolen from us. Military, as a lot of people depended on our ancestors for protection, even with the arrival of the Spanish people, they needed protection from the Apaches, and we protected them. The O'odham military, the warriors or protectors were probably already all throughout the land, beyond the reservation, to protect us, but then that protection had to extend to the Spanish people and then the Magadan people who came through the gold rush to look for gold in California. And then also the military, our men, volunteered in the military at high rates. And this is kind of because they had to, because the livelihood built off the water, with the water running out and being dammed, there was no way to support the families, so the men had to go to the military as an option to support themselves and their family. The voice, again, kind of goes back to the archaeological story of the Hohokam. I can barely say that. The Hohokam. They want to control our story, and it's been a long, hard fight. For example, the Pueblo Grande Museum just renamed itself to the Totava Hog Tash Museum because didn't reflect the origins of the museum. Pueblo is associated kind of more with New Mexico tribes and that type of culture, rather than Himdag or Atom. So a lot of these things are kind of taken away from us in different ways, and they all kind of build up our Himdag. I don't know. Can you guys think of any other ways that they our Himdag is kind of taken away, I guess? I can probably think of a lot of ways, but I kind of made this presentation on the fly today, to be honest. Yeah. So this is kind of what we have left with our Himdag. And there's a lot we're proud of, and we know, but there's more to the story, and I kind of want to encourage everyone to look into, do the research, and it requires, talking to elders that know this, know these things, and taking the time. When I was younger, I would go participate in like the Unity Run and different things, and I learned a lot. So when I see these places like the Beshkogoa place or the Mesa Grande or things like that, I know that they're kind of from our culture, because when I would go on these runs or be in TO for whatever, they would say, the warriors or the people would go out there, and they would be like, do their scouting, and it's be like, where exactly, where do you mean? And they're just like over there, like past you guys or whatnot. So I know that these places are for scouting. They are for getting things to support the military, to support the protectors, like arrowheads, making agave sinew to tie things with. So yeah. So that's kind of all that is kind of before this, what we know and love. The super dark part, or I don't know, one of these shades of brown, this one, is the first part of the reservation established. And then this little slice kept getting added on throughout the years into what we know now. And I think the tribe bought this mountain, one of these mountains, and then they also got where the storage in the ship one. So yeah, I kind of wanted to tell a different story, or one that you couldn't find on the website. You see that, any more info. Just before I finish, so to emphasize, this red part is kind of more or less the Ugam area. It's known as ancestral lands. That's where you'll find Ugam artifacts and this is considered the Aboriginal territory. The federal government set up a committee to investigate, I guess, kind of more or less the history of tribes and how they should be compensated for their land. And so this is what the red border is what they kind of identified as Auckland lines. This is kind of what we reconsider tribal land. And the federal government did compensate tribes, I think for like pennies per acre. I have to double check how much, but like it's just not a lot of money basically, especially for back in that time period. And yeah, the Kipash people also, in the earlier slide, I showed you this. They're along with the Spatanian culture prehistorically, and then part of them got broken off, and we used them as allies to fight off the Yuma tribes and the Apaches. So they also are part of the community. Just to quickly talk about the Tribal Historic Preservation Office, like I said, there are lands where we can have a say for if they're federally funded, and if they're on, depending on what land they're on, if it's private or federal land, so a lot of forest land, national parks, we get to have a say in what, if they find human remains or items of cultural patrimony or sacred objects or funerary objects. Also, in federal land, there's something called the National Environmental Policy Act and the National Historic Preservation Act. So if those have to deal with if there's structures there that can be saved, we talk to the federal government about how to best leave those intact. And then there's also Arizona Barrier Discovery Laws. Those, if human remains are found and they're identified with by culture, then they're returned, they're repatriated to the community. Also, sacred objects, cultural patrimony, and funerary objects. Yeah. So yeah, that's our office. I didn't update this. Samantha Thompson isn't. She's not with the office. She hasn't been with the office for a while. So, any questions? No questions. Okay. And thank you guys. I made these presentations kind of. One of them was on the fly, so I apologize if it wasn't correct.
So what happened, like, what's your guys' process for your office? Like, it's anybody in that context for your office. What's the normal process?
Well, like if it's like a random Metagon person, they find stuff in the attic, which happens often, and it's like their grandparents, like they included a grave site within the community or off the community. They call our office and we arrange to have the items repatriated, and they're considered like a public donation in a sense, yeah. So the main thing that with those types of issues or examples is we don't want anybody selling them to the markets, which there is a market for items like that. Yeah. So we don't want people making monetary gains with our items. And when we work with museums or schools have a lot of items. Some we consider baskets typically like they were sold fairly, arguably in some sense. They were sold fair and squarely, so kind of some baskets aren't repatriated, they're just kept. Other schools, they say if it depends on how and what circumstances the items were sold. So, for example, the community's water started getting diverted, and so we couldn't grow our crops, and we had to start, I guess, buying food, which is something that we didn't do. So they had to start selling baskets to buy things that they needed. And in that circumstance, it could be like they sold this under duress. And so it should be returned to the tribe because they were under duress from not having the resource of water. But not all the schools have that type of definition.
What is the line of where you can go to this and cross with any organization as to repatriation or cultural appropriation for objects? And is it just objects or is there anything like any recording?
Any what?
Like anything else recorded? Like whether
Oh,
video or audio?
Yeah. Audios and recordings are kind of different because the laws that were made are specific to human remains and sacred objects and objects of cultural patrimony. So those have to be I don't think they are part of the repatriation process. They have to be returned. They're returned. They have to be identified and then returned. So we have some songs, and keep in mind too, as I say this, there's a lot of songs out there at universities that we don't. It's another slice of the pie that is taken from us, or that universities have. So, luckily, though, in this day and age, a lot of things are changing. A lot of institutions want to share the knowledge with the tribes, and they recognize that it's bringing back language and songs and things like that. The big problem is once we get them is time and money and getting someone to be dedicated to translate those things. Not everyone speaks the language. So nice.
When did the organization develop and start doing all this?
The law was passed in the 1990s, and then the tribe had different offices that were a bit minor than the Tribal Historic Preservation Office. So the Tribal Historic Preservation Office is a function of the tribal, like the National Environmental Protection Act. The one after that, I forgot, I'm sorry, I haven't been for it. But it's a federal, a function of the federal government. So tribes can choose to have a Tribal Historic Preservation Office if they have the resources, and the government can provide more resources, but it takes a lot of work to start it up. So the tribe is, compared to other tribes, kind of ahead. Some tribes, it just depends on too if not all the tribes want their human remains or objects saved, I guess, because those things are they're really superstitious about death and being around it, and so some tribes don't want those things.
Because I was just thinking like way back when, I knew there was a couple of stores that would gather those artifacts and they were selling them or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's unfortunate, like, that stuff happens, but we only have a say if it's on federal land or a federally funded project, and if it's human remains, or if it's considered a sacred object or a funerary object. And, when we see stuff like that, sometimes there's no way to tell if it was found in a burial, they can say a burial context. It could just be found randomly and considered just a regular artifact. Like for example, there was an issue of the news like last year. There's a project, low-income housing in the city, and somebody found that there was pottery shards around the project, and they put it on their social media and made a big deal about it, and didn't understand, I guess, we don't really want that type of stuff being identified or where its whereabouts are, because people will then start convening in those areas and start trying for that to sell on the black market or in auctions and stuff. And it's just kind of best to just leave it there and not let anybody know about it. And they try their best to identify barriers where those developments are occurring, and that's when we can have a say. There's just so much artifacts out there that some of it, not all of it is really, it's considered plainware. It's just kind of everyday use, like in the kitchen or for getting water. It's not necessarily like a ceremonial use, or it wasn't put to rest with somebody during their burial, or it wasn't used in coming of age. So we distinct between those types of pottery. There's a lot of pottery that's just considered plainware.
Yeah, it's, where we live at Stella Mountains is so big, and they had a lot of the carvings, big carvings, and they were jackhammered out.
Oh yeah.
A lot of that was jackhammered out.
Yeah. I guess I have to say too with that, like if you're exploring in the community, that be mindful of posting things on social media and where they are, because we don't want attention brought to those areas, the wrong kind of attention, because that has occurred. That's kind of guiding policies of how to manage those areas and kind of do it where there's not a lot of attention.
Yeah, because who knows how long they've been there,
Yeah.
And all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And there are stuff outside the reservation, like South Mountain and Vinum Block, which is what's the regular name? Superstition Mountain 2. Just all the mountains have those things, and people walk by them every day. People know about them. They're tagged over. A lot of things are, and that's kind of where we try to tell the cities, the parks and recs, whoever manages the areas, to be mindful and have kind of a policy on how to educate people and try to emphasize those things are important to educate the public.
You guys are kind of active in trying to be at the table when something is being developed, something is being planned, you guys try to always be there.
Yeah.
Is it always just like a one-person team, or is it like a two-person?
We try to work together as an office, and there's 4 of us, and there's hundreds of projects, development projects, parks and rec projects. So
housing.
housing, yeah. So
Does the THPO have any present projects that works with others to record their traditional stories?
We don't at the moment. Sometimes there are new projects that come up where like it would help us to protect or inform the other people that this is an important resource or place or object, and we do reach out, but there's no like a regular program to do that. And yeah, so. No rockstar? My dad also.
Just to make a point when you were talking at the beginning, I forget the name of that museum in downtown Phoenix. What's the name of that? On the other side of the library.
Oh, the Herd Museum?
Yeah, the Herd Museum. Well, a long time ago, I went down there and they were talking about, the aldermen, how they're not affiliated with, old,
Yeah.
and they were really, they wanted to drive the point, and I was just, there was a lot of other like Mexicans and
Yeah.
like I was the only native there,
Yeah.
but they were really driving that point that they are gone, they weren't part of us, you know what I mean, real bad.
Yeah.
It was something about it, and I just couldn't believe when I started listening to what they're trying to say,
Yeah, that's been a issue for a long time with archaeologists. Some of them don't believe that we are descendants from the Hugam, but there's a lot of evidence, and it's important for community members, young community members, anybody that wants to publish and do research on us. There's just so much, like, for example, like, we know the community now, how it is, but how many of you guys know how to fish? But fishing was so important to, like, I have this documented. I meant to share, but since you brought it up, let's see. So it says, it's a quote from Father Kino, who was the first I think the first like Mexican European here. So it says, all its inhabitants are fishermen and have many nets and other tackle which they fish all the year, sustaining themselves with abundant fish and with maize, beans, and calabashes which we squash. So there's a lot taken away from us that they don't consider, and they just assume that, they don't take into account how much we've been through. And I was just reading in another book, and the research always continues. It's about the Pima, the Spanish time era in our history. We don't know a lot about that. But I was reading about some of it, and it was saying that there is a lot of death happening when the Spanish people came because of the plagues and whatnot. And I theorize that it killed off a lot of people to where we don't know how to build those adobe structures. We don't know a lot of the stories that went with them. And, it's not brought to light that part of the sickness part, the death part. Even when they took the river away, how little it was, the population was 50% of the children died when the river stopped running. It was hard to feed our people, so that's a lot of missed opportunities to pass on knowledge and stories and things like that. So what we inventor is a lot, basically. So it's important to get into the research. If you need resources, you can always contact me at the office. I can recommend books and elders and whatnot. So there's like a lot out there. So
I was just about to ask you if you had any book recommendation from author history.
yeah, you probably already know Pima Remembers. That's a good one. There is Forced to Abandon Our Fields, which is it quantifies a lot of the number of crops grown, the magnitude of it. It puts it into like a number, a specific number. It talks about all the specific fish that that ran in the Gila River, the species of fish, and anything by Amadeo Rea. He identified a lot of the birds and what they are, what they mean to the culture. I don't know, can you guys think
The
of
mammals, either mammals, birds,
mammals? He talked about mammals too.
Anything on like
plants,
traditional plants, medicine.
either plants,
He talks about those too.
either four books.
Yeah. So there's a whole big giant book, like it's almost $100. Yeah.
No, it's the desert screenings.
Huh?
The desert screenings.
At the Desert Screenings, that's what it's called. Yeah.
Thank you.
That one's really good. Oh, no.